Traffic Commission meeting. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the October 2020 Commission meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 2 is a request by Miss Mandy Fox of Riverside Street and Mr. Peter Del Tradici of Riverside Street to install an all-way stop at the intersection of Riverside Street and Irving Street. Sergeant Sampson?
Thank you, Chief. We do have the petitioners here. Ms. Fox and Mr. Del Tradici are online if they'd like to start.
Sure. Thanks for having us. Mandy Fox, 109 Riverside. I see some neighbors have joined as well. Thank you. We put together a petition over the summer because we've noticed a lot of very near misses at Riverside and Irving. We know that this has been addressed in the past, but we have seen an uptick in traffic, an uptick in ride-sharing apps that we think are non-neighborhood traffic, and so we want to address this to get some traffic calming in the area. Right now, while everyone is sort of not driving, it hasn't been too crazy, but the idea is to try and get something in place so when the pandemic is over and traffic picks back up Riverside and Irving, and when Perkins reopens fully, that we have not as many near misses and God forbid anything worse than that, which I know is a stipulation for getting a four-way stop. So we have a petition of 70 neighbors, a lot of energy in the neighborhood for a four-way stop there, and that's why we're here.
Okay, thanks, Mandy.
And sorry, thank you to Sergeant Sampson, who's talked with us and already put some things in the works, including having some officers out, checking out the area, talking to Perkins, and helping us brainstorm some additional projects that may be going on this could be in conjunction with. So we appreciate the partnership there.
Okay, great.
And I'm Peter Del Tradici. I would just add briefly that this is really an attempt on our part to call attention to something we see as a very potentially significant problem in the future, and doing something about it before it becomes a problem. There's a new condo complex going in at the corner of Irving and North Beacon Street, and we all know that the traffic in Watertown Square has been getting worse and worse over time, and the plan for dealing with that traffic has sort of been put on hold. And in the meantime, there's more traffic in our neighborhood, and that is only going to increase. And as Mandy said, putting the four-way stop sign in is a very cost-effective way of achieving traffic calming. And because Riverside Street essentially dead ends at Perkins and is where it leaves Watertown Square is essentially a one-way street. There's very little traffic on it, so there's no real downside as far as I can tell to making it a four-way stop sign, and there's only positive benefits that would flow from it. So that's our position on this issue.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Does anyone else want to speak? Any residents? Go. Well, first, Sybil DiCarlo. You're muted though.
Am I okay now? Thank you, officer. So I live in the neighborhood for about 7 years now, and since the pandemic, I'm walking 2-3 times in my entire neighborhood where that four-way would be. And can I tell you, every day I almost witness an accident. UPS, FedEx, drivers are just speeding on through, and fortunately I have decent vision, but I am always looking front, sideways, behind me before I step out off of the curb. And I see a lot of young mothers out with their kids, and I just feel that at times they're alarmed when traffic is going so fast and they stop at the sign kind of like, oh my God, there is someone, I have to stop at the stop sign. And I read something about that there have to be at least 5 accidents before. Can I tell you, I wouldn't want it to be your child or anybody's child to ever be injured. So I am all for the four-way sign. I don't see what the negatives would be. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who else? Bolzon?
Yes, hi.
Right.
Hi, my name is Sophie Bolzan and I'm at 86 Riverside Street. Something that we've noticed too since the dealerships in the area, a lot of the cars being tested take Riverside Street. And sometimes they just go so fast, they don't even stop. And it's really scary. And our area is a test track for Lexus, Toyota, Volkswagen. So I just wanted to add to that, to what everyone's saying.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else? Council Felton.
Good afternoon. Thank you for considering this petition and taking the time to hear the residents during the pandemic. And I know that, as you're well aware, this is continues to come up time and time again. I'm not sure if a traffic engineering study was done, but I was just wondering, and I don't know if the criteria would fit now, but looking in the future of the bike pedestrian plan and the Riverway there at Irving Street serving as the connector between the river and the square. You know, when in looking at the criteria or some of the warrants for making decisions, I noticed a two each for stop sign and then 2 for multi-stop sign that maybe the traffic commission consider, if not now in the future. But I would just mention per the MUTCD that one was stopping the direction that conflicts the most with established pedestrian crossing activity or school walking routes. So I know we are directing more pedestrians, and my understanding is the intention to add a bike lane on Irving Street as well. So maybe that would fit. And of course, Perkins School being nearby, the walking route for the blind. The other is stopping the direction that has the longest distance of uninterrupted flow approaching the intersection. And that certainly would be Irving Street. So that's just 2. I know there's several criteria that you could use in consideration of making your decision. But again, for multi-stops, they talk about perhaps the need to control conflicts near locations that generate high pedestrian volumes. I don't know if the volumes are high enough. Of course, that would be up to you all in an engineering study to determine if that would be the case, but it is again, a school route and also a river route. And another one I thought was kind of interesting, I know Peter Del Tredici spoke to, he felt like there's not a lot of traffic at the one end of Riverside because of Perkins School being essentially a dead end, although it's in and out of Perkins, is that when the volume of traffic on intersection of the roads is approximately equal. And so I don't know if that's a qualification. And I was looking at the 101 North Beacon project that's coming online, and study that was done at this point almost 2 years ago. And, you know, we were all anticipating too that a lot of people are going to be taking public transportation. I'm not sure how, you know, you wonder how that will play out because of the pandemic and the cuts there. So there will be some increase with that project. It remains to be seen, of course, between that and then we have the marijuana facility coming on board. A lot of changes I know that you all are dealing with, that we're all dealing with and looking to the future. But I noticed that the trip generations will increase somewhat from that project alone. And so, but I was just trying to, I understand, you know, from an engineering perspective and reviewing those, the manual controls and seeing, okay, are there things that could be a little, that might fit, but instead of waiting to decide, you know, if there were fatal or high accident intersection there. So I just offer up those potential considerations, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that wants to speak? Annie Ham? And then we'll go to Cal.
Hi, it's Ben and Anaheim. We live at 110 Riverside, and just wanted to just kind of point out that there's a lot of little kids in the neighborhood. We have young children. So that's our concern, is that it's not just, you know, that there is a lot of activity with little kids and kids in the neighborhood playing together and going from house to house and stuff like that. So that's our thought on why we'd like to see traffic a little slowed down in this area.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bays?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, Councilor Feltner, for all that work. That was very impressive. I wanted to also focus on the value of what the citizens have to say about what's happening in their neighborhoods. You know, the last time I think it was Councilor Feltner and I were here, it was for Lincoln Street. And I just heard last week that, you know, after the people on Lincoln Street said this is dangerous, that, you know, we have a difficult and dangerous situation here. Someone last week got hit on Spruce Street right around from someone. And what I want to say is that the residents are the first people to know when there's an issue. They're the ones who see this happening. You know, people who've lived in the same neighborhood for years and years and years, like Peter, you know, they might not have seen this 5-10 years ago, but we are getting denser. There are more people coming through town. And so they are the ones who are seeing the changes. And it would be really, really nice if we could prevent the tragedies happening before they happen by listening to the residents who are saying, oh, we've got a problem now. So I just really want you to consider that, especially as we get denser, and this might be coming up more and more in other neighborhoods. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Chief.
Who's that? I didn't see.
Chief?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, we have to take into consideration what the residents say, but we also have to take into consideration what Sergeant Sampson and Mr. Me said back in 2017. And, you know, they're the professionals on this. And so, I mean, I just think we have to weigh that in.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Chief, if I could add to that a little bit, you know, I appreciate very much both counselors' perspective on that, and I think it is very important and what the neighbors, you know, think and see and experience on a day-to-day basis. And Councilor Bays is absolutely right that they are, you know, the eyes and ears that are there on a daily basis and see what's happening and can, you know, experience changes that are occurring much more so than, you know, I can sitting in my office. Having said that, you know, I think the other part of that that's very important is, so how do you apply a consistent standard or defensible standard to the you know, evidence you get from neighbors? You know, the neighbors, I'll give one example. We often get people who will come here and say, you need to do something about traffic on the street. And we'll do an analysis where we, you know, record the traffic on the street, and it really isn't going faster than the speed limit. It's, you know, the perception of it going by is fast, and the perception is that it's a problem. But I think it's really important that we apply an objective standard when we're deciding to do things. That way they are not only consistent, but they're also defensible, which is important in terms of, you know, town and liability and things of that nature. So I think that's the reason that some of the criteria that Councilor Feltner was referring to are important to apply. And looking at something like applying a four-way stop, it's important that we consider the, the standards that are put out there by the professionals and evaluate that. I think Laura Castelli was asked to be here by DPW as a, our traffic engineering consultant, and certainly somebody who's familiar with this area and studied it quite a bit. And if it's all right with you, Chief, I think it might make sense to maybe let her weigh in a little bit on this intersection, how it does or doesn't meet standards.
Sure. Laura?
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Chief. And hi, everybody. Good to see some of you again. And I know that it's been a while. And I think I've been listening. I hear what everyone says. I think, it's important for you to know that this is not an isolated incident or location, within Watertown or within even Eastern Massachusetts. This is a conversation that's going on in all of the communities, especially as we're spending more time at home and kind of more time in the roadways in front of our house. But I think Steve had a great point about, setting a standard of care and also remembering that, everything that we do is somewhat funded by the state, and the guidance is there not only to help protect us, but also, so that you can get in a plane someday, hopefully soon, and fly across the country and be able to rent a car and drive there because you know how and you know what to expect and you know what you're going to see on the roads. So it is really important to follow the guidance, and that's kind of the carrot, right? So you can get out and do what you need to do no matter where in the country you are. And the hook from the state is that if they get evidence that you're not following the guidance, they can pull the funding that supports things like repaving the roads. And I'm not to say that would happen in this situation, but I think it's helpful for folks to understand kind of the full gamut of all of the different issues and why we follow the standards and why they're important. And I think, Lisa, Councilor Feltner did a great job kind of summarizing some of what was in the MUTCD. And, some of them are hard and fast rules, but some of them are also guidance. And I think one that struck me is that there's traffic volume guidance that goes along with that too. And when they talk about the traffic volumes at a location where you're recommending an always stop, what we like to see is about 300 cars an hour on one of the streets. And that could be Irving Street or Riverside Street. In this case, even though Irving has the stop sign, that's the street that has the higher volume, right? So you'd want to see 300 cars an hour on Irving Street. And then you'd want to see during those, for 8 hours of the day, and they could be any 8 hours of the day, they don't need to be consecutive. And what you would want to see on Riverside Street during those same hours are 200 units. And that can be a combination of cars, bicyclists, pedestrians, transit vehicles. So when you're talking about that magnitude, right, and I see some eyebrows raising from different folks on the screen, on Irving Street today, there are about 700 cars total for the whole day. And the volume warrant thresholds are 300 per hour. And on Riverside Street, it's less. It's about 400 or 500 vehicles. Now, that being said, the dead end portion of Riverside Street actually does have more volume on it east of Irving than the section west of Irving. So I think that's important to note as well. I think that speaks to the parking lots from the Perkins School having access there. And then, the crashes are a part of it too, and it's 5 crashes. I think, I don't think that this is a reactive thing. You don't wait to have a crash before you address the problem, but there isn't evidence of any crashes happening, which, although you're seeing the near misses in your neighborhood, and I totally get that, I think it's actually a good sign because your sight lines and your striping and the things that the town has done to kind of help your situation, it shows me those things are working because people are able to actively avoid getting into an incident, which is important, and it's a part of driving. So with the volume threshold just being so far off and no evidence of crashes happening over the past several years, we wouldn't recommend an always stop for this location at this time. I think that, Ms. Fox talked about traffic calming, and I do think that that's important. I don't think of an always stop sign as a traffic calming measure. An always stop sign is a traffic control device. There are other traffic calming measures. The town actually has a traffic calming project for this intersection on their complete streets prioritization plan. So that is another process that you can work with DPW and MassDOT to get a project funded. That's a traffic calming project that may help you. And there are other similar projects and avenues through the Watertown Square improvement process or improvement project, which I've heard rumblings may be starting again in 2021, that can help to address some of these issues. The one other thing that I think Councilor Feltner was mentioning was the idea of a bicycle lane on Irving Street. That was recommended as part of the Arsenal Street corridor study, and that was, you know, basically shot down by your neighbors on Irving Street. They were very against encouraging any pedestrian or bicycle traffic on Irving Street towards the river. So, you know, I recognize some of you from that process, but I also don't recognize others. So if things like that are important to you, then as the Watertown Square project kicks up again, it's really important that you come out, and hopefully it will be, you know, both in person and virtual so that we can get everybody out. But it's really important that you come out and you have your thoughts heard on the subject, so that, you know, we get a more balanced response, because if you only hear from one side of the coin, that tends to be the direction that we head. So those are our thoughts on it. We have not completed the formal engineering study for the always stop control, because that was going to be completed as part of the Watertown Square improvement project, which is on hold. But we collected a lot of the data. So I was able to kind of go through the warrant and see where you were. I think we would be having a little bit of a different discussion, particularly if the volume piece was anywhere close to what they would recommend in the warrants.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, can I ask you a question, Laura? And I guess I want to just preface this by saying, you know, thank you to all the residents for coming forward with this. I think the councils are right that we listen to the residents, and I think we do. And I think, you know, we try to, you know, do the traffic commission in ways that we don't, you know, we follow guidance and we don't become a town full of signs and a town full of speed bumps and in that nature. But this has come, you know, to me twice as the traffic commission chairman. And, you know, I am sympathetic, I think, to this street. And I think because of Perkins and the kids that do have to walk down that street. So, you know, obviously we've heard that, you know, about the guidance for a four-way stop, and it doesn't fit here. But I just want to go back to Laura. You mentioned traffic calming measures and funding for that. Are there some examples? And this is one I bring up. I don't know the specifics of if this is one of them, but, you know, we have raised tables in certain streets in town. So, and they're in other locations too. You know, there's one in Belmont near my house, and you know, I see that as a traffic calming measure, but I just don't see how, you know, would that fit in this scenario?
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, there's some things you have to look at. You have to consider drainage and the alignment of the roadway and things like that too. But I think the raised speed table or the raised intersection, similar to what's on Church Street in Watertown, is what's being recommended as part of the Complete Streets prioritization plan. And you know, that's a funding source for the town, because you do often have to move catch basins and adjust your drainage to put in features like that. So it can become costly. It's not the pavement that's expensive, it's the work that you don't see. So I think that's an excellent idea. I think that is something that can be pursued. I think, you know, I looked at the roadway myself, and I noticed, you know, before the leaves fell off the trees, that when you're heading northbound on Irving Street, the tree that's right in advance of the stop sign is starting to hang a little low. So I talked to Matt about that. He's going to have someone from DPW come by and uplimb the tree so that, you know, the lower branches are just sitting a little bit higher so that the stop sign is visible. Things like that, you know, neighborhood options as well. Like I see, you know, 8 or 10 residents of the neighborhood on the phone right now, remembering that, how you want people to behave when they're driving in your neighborhood, right? So when you're in your car, go intentionally slow. You know, do be deliberate about how you drive through your neighborhood so that other people see that and kind of start to get the hint. A lot of this is very psychological. Sometimes I joke that I should have a psychology degree and not an engineering degree, but it's all driver behavior, right? Like, people don't come to Watertown from Belmont and drive differently than they drive in Belmont, right? And I can say that because I live in Belmont and I work in Watertown. But so think about, you know, how you want folks in your neighborhood to drive it and be the example. And I think, you know, in neighborhoods like this, that actually drives a lot of change, because it's not just the people driving through your neighborhood, it's sometimes your neighbors too. And you know, Matt did commit to looking at the prioritization plan and figuring out, you know, what the next steps for the town is on that, so that he can maybe start to advance some of these other projects that are on there for you.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak?
I would, if we have a second. I just have a question.
Sure.
This is Jason Curve. I'm a resident of Watertown, and I'm just curious about something. You know, there's the criteria and whatnot of that area. Does the fact that Perkins is a school for the blind, you know, how does a unique situation like that get taken into consideration when you look at other criteria that are almost certainly designed for, you know, a more generic situation? So we certainly do have a number of folks who are blind in the community who walk frequently. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that came up a lot during the Arsenal Street corridor study too. So, you know, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but for some ways it's easier with populations that are sight impaired, because they're very deliberate about how they walk along the street and cross the street. So what we want to focus on there is accessibility and making sure that, you know, the slopes and the cross slopes of the streets and the sidewalks and the curb ramps all meet accessibility standards, that the tactile warning strips, which are those strips that you see at the intersections with the raised bumps, that they're there, so that because that's a cue to them that they're entering what can be a dangerous situation and they need to use their other senses to help them navigate that situation. So we do focus a lot more on some of those accessibility details. And we do that everywhere, but particularly in Watertown, in this neighborhood and along Arsenal Street. We know the routes that the Perkins School uses to help their students learn how to be out on a roadway in a safe manner. And the town, I think, does a really good job of making sure that those routes are fully accessible and meeting the latest standards so that they can do that safely. But they're also way less likely to jaywalk and just run across the street because they don't see a car coming and they're stopping at a neighbor's house than we are, because it's a lot harder for them to do that. And we are using, you know, a sense that, or maybe in some cases two senses that they don't have.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Hi, this is Nina Dudnick. I also live in the neighborhood around the corner. And I think Laura's point about psychology of driving is actually an excellent one in this case, because it's not immediately evident if you don't live in the neighborhood that there isn't a four-way stop at that intersection. And so what I see on a routine basis, I drive through at minimum twice a day, is this kind of stop-start, tentative standoff between people who halfway realize that there isn't a stop sign, start to move into the intersection as another car coming from the opposite direction starts to move into the intersection after having been at the stop. So it's actually, I think, in this case, the psychology of the driving is an excellent indicator of the fact that a four-way stop really would mitigate the problem. Thank you. Oh.
Okay, any other comments?
Hi, it's Sibel.
Go ahead, Sybil.
Hi, could I ask what, if you know what the average of a cost of the four-way sign would cost the state? I'm just curious about the expenses as well.
So for the town, the state wouldn't pay for it. It'd be a town expenditure. It's about, you know, $500 a sign, and about $200 or $250 for the posts. You know, there may or may not be some striping that needs to be refreshed. There may or may not be some, tree trimming and sightline enhancements that have to happen. And those costs can vary depending on the circumstance.
Thank you. Would you know if there's an annual budget for that kind of work then through the town every year?
There's probably a maintenance budget, but I can't speak specifically to a budget for new signage.
Thank you.
I don't think this is a budget issue. If the signs were warranted and we decided to put them there, putting them in would not be a budget issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Say like one final comment on my part.
Okay.
Again, my name is Peter Del Tredici, but whoever just spoke about the psychology of that intersection, they're absolutely right, is that you don't know whether you're supposed to stop or not, and actually just watch how people behave when they come. The people in the neighborhood behave as though it's a four-way stop sign. That is really that's the example we want to set for everyone, is you come to a complete stop at that intersection. And to drive through it without stopping is not the example we want. And what's remarkable is that most people approaching that intersection assume it's a four-way stop sign, and that causes a certain amount of confusion. And it's actually, it's that uncertainty about should I or should I not stop. This is in fact part of what makes it a dangerous intersection, in my opinion.
Thanks. Councilor Felton, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. I was just going to make one more comment that I think I sense not just here, but particularly here in other areas of town, with all the growth that we have and the amount of construction, there's a lot more truck traffic than usual, and it's coming up Irving and Riverside and North Beacon and Arsenal, and of course it's very loud. So just to add that perspective, I think sometimes that, well, of course it makes me as a pedestrian, but a lot of people nervous, especially with their kids. And so I think just recognizing that there's this elevated concern because of that doesn't mean it's necessarily more dangerous, but that is part of the narrative, I think, of more residents. I can't tell you how many times people are asking for speed bumps in other areas of town. It's like we want speed bumps on every side street. So anyway, I empathize with people. I live in a neighborhood that has a lot of growth, and I understand that it's a difficult decision, but there are standards, and most every average person, as a counselor myself, educating myself that there are these engineering standards and why they're there, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to the average person, but I appreciate your deliberations.
I have one comment to Laura's comment about how, and I understand the continuity of stop signs in one state versus another, and I appreciate that, but it's short-sighted to say that if you go from one side of the country to the other, we have people from different countries that have different rules and regulations. And the problem is it's short-sighted to think that, everyone in the world has the same rules and, street sign pattern. And so I just think it'd be short-sighted to think that, we can solve a problem that America is facing when we're a country of, our town of immigrants and people from different parts of the world who just don't have the same way of driving. Stop signs are not. So also, I just find it a shame to be reactionary. I do believe it's reactionary, and maybe the statutes or whatever we have in place are maybe a little antiquated, and Watertown could start changing those things to make it better for people, young and old.
Right, but these aren't our guidelines. These are from the state. These are the state.
I understand, but I mean, I understand.
It comes down to then the funding and all that. So it's like, we have this guidance that we kind of follow, and it's like, this is Riverside and Irving, but we have many other streets and many other things. So
I understand that, but just to say that, we
all, you
large
know.
community, diverse community, and
No, I
we're
get
very
it.
proud of that.
Listen, we're not here to, like, we're here, we totally support, like, we want every car in every street to go slow. We
Yep.
want that. You know? Like Councilor Feldman said, are we gonna put a speed bump on every street in Watertown? Like, is that the answer to it?
No.
No, it's not. So we try to find that middle ground. And you know, I know we've gone through this, you know, numerous times, and we're not meeting the criteria. So as a traffic commission, you know, it just puts us in a very difficult spot, you know, to say, you know, it's like, oh, you know, they don't want to do it. This might happen, or this might happen. We get that all the time. I get that away from the traffic commission through emails and everything else. And that's kind of why I was trying to steer the conversation towards, okay, if that's, you know, the guidance and we don't meet that criteria, then what other things can we do? And that's why I brought up that raised table. I mean, everyone, you know, Sergeant Sampson might give me an earful after this meeting. Why'd you bring that up? But like, that's just something that I'm thinking of that would slow all the cars down, because you have to slow down. And you're going to get back into that, you know, the one in Belmont, like you think it's a four-way stop, but it's really not. And, but that's what I was trying to just see, are there other things that we could be doing here to get to the same place without putting four-way stop up?
I'm sorry, could I follow up two things? I know a lot of people think stop signs are traffic calming measures, but if you look at the standards and if you're a traffic engineer, you'll see they're not traffic calming and shouldn't be. The average citizen might think that they are, but they're not. They don't slow down speeds necessarily. That's not what they're for. But my question is, it's kind of come up a few times. I'm wondering if either the Traffic Commission or DPW are there, you know, data, information, reports that could be made available to the public or to counselors so you can see some of the warrants and the studies that were done and help understand, you know, the decisions that were made based on the data and the research that you've done and what's happening on our roads. I think that would also help be more informed and perhaps get buy-in and more understanding of complete streets and how we advocate for true traffic calming and funding. But I would love to see that myself as a counselor. Thank you.
Sarge, do you have the numbers for Rivers? Are you asking for this particular intersection, Council? I think we have those.
Well, you know, mostly what I see is when there's a project and there's traffic studies, but no, I think, you know, whether it's Paul Free and Church Street or areas that maybe required more an actual study or warrants versus relying on Vanessa and World Tech and DPW and I think you know what I'm saying. I don't know, Laura, you.
I mean, I'm sure that the DPW would be fine with us sharing the data with you. I think in this particular case, because we sort of put the pause on the Watertown Square project, I don't have a formal study to share. You know, my experience has been that anytime we provide a formal study, the town shares it with all of the residents. But we can certainly share the data that we have and kind of the conclusions that we've drawn from it absent the formal study. And you know, I'm hopeful that the project does pick up again next year, and then you would have the full formal study for the location.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion at this point, if that's okay with you. I would suggest that we ask the administration to pursue the Complete Streets project for this location and see if we can get that funded and constructed, and ask DPW to look into that.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So we appreciate everyone. I think that's probably, you know, I know it's not easy saying that no, but just, you know, you just understand that we're with you with this. Let's get this study done and let's see what we can do up there to calm the traffic. Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. You
Happy
too.
Thanksgiving. Bye,
Happy
everybody.
Thanksgiving.
Okay, item number 3 is a request by Sergeant Sampson of the Watertown Police Department to include the following isolated stop signs in Schedule 4 of the traffic rules and orders. A, Broadway for northbound traffic at Columbia Street. B, Robbins Road for southbound traffic at Columbia Street. Sergeant Sampson.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. Again, similar to last month, when the town engineer, Mr. Schuman, was working on the Common Street project, and as that work was getting close to completed, he noticed that some of the stop signs, the isolated stop signs that are already in existence, are not noted within the traffic rules and orders. So in order to update that document, I'm asking permission to be able to add those, send those to the town manager and add those to the traffic rules and orders.
Thank you, Sergeant. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we have the traffic rules and orders recognize existing traffic stop signs at the locations indicated by Sergeant Sampson.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, item number 4 is a request by Sergeant Sampson of the Watertown Police Department to include the following right turn on red prohibitions in Schedule 7 of the traffic rules and orders. A, Arsenal Street for westbound traffic at Coolidge Ave. B, Arsenal Street for 617 Arsenal Street, turning east onto Arsenal Street. C, Mount Auburn Street for eastbound traffic at Arlington Street. D, Mount Auburn Street for westbound traffic at Arlington Street. E, Arlington Street for northbound traffic at Mount Auburn Street. And F, Arlington Street for southbound traffic at Mount Auburn Street. Sergeant Sampson.
Thank you, Chief. Again, this is similar to item number 3. These are not listed within the traffic rules and orders. As you can see, it's Arsenal Street coming westbound to Coolidge Ave. That is a no right on red going on to Coolidge Ave. The sign is there. It's been there for a number of years. It's not in the traffic rules and orders. Same thing with coming out of by the old Miller's Ale House, coming out of Arsenal, the Arsenal Yards onto Arsenal Street as a no turn on red to go eastbound on Arsenal Street. All signs are erected at Mount Auburn at Arlington in all 4 directions. I would like to just add those as well to the traffic rules and orders.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make one suggestion, the reference to 617 Arsenal, which is the Miller's Ale House address, that intersection, that roadway will be Forge Road, Forge. So maybe if we could refer to that in that designation, I think that'd be helpful going forward. With that, I would move that we accept those existing right turn only locations as described by Sergeant Sampson as part of the rules and ordinances.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thanks. Okay, item number 5 is any new business. Do we have any new business? Okay, hearing none. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, have a great, happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Yes,
too.
you all.
Thank you.